My job at the Thessaly Concord Embassy was never glamorous. I kept the wine glasses full, the translation cuffs charged, and the seating charts honest, because on Driftmark Station, a wrong seating chart could end a trade agreement faster than a bad one. I had been the human cultural liaison there for 3 years, long enough to know which Vecinari elders needed their chairs angled away from the windows, and which ones would talk for 40 minutes about mineral rights if you let them. The night of Sale Voren's 22nd name day, I was working the floor in a green dress I'd bought specifically because it didn't show stains. Sale was the ambassador's ward, raised on the station since she was an infant, and her name day reception had pulled in half the Concord's minor nobility, along with a scattering of trade delegates who hadn't been invited so much as tolerated. The room ran warm gold under the embassy's low lighting, full of low voices and lower laughter, the particular hum of people being polite to each other for professional reasons. I'd done 40 of these receptions by then, give or take, and they all run on the same current underneath the small talk. Somebody is owed an apology they'll never get. Somebody is angling for a contract they'll never mention by name. Somebody's cousin has had too much of the pale liquor and is one bad joke from an incident. My entire function, as far as the embassy was concerned, was to feel that current before it became a problem and steer it somewhere harmless, toward the canapes, toward the music, toward anywhere that wasn't a headline. I was good at it. I'd never once failed at it, which is its own kind of arrogance, the sort that makes you slow to recognize the one current you can't redirect with a smile and a fresh glass. I noticed Threl Maog before anyone else did, because noticing things was my actual job description, whatever the badge said. He was a minor cousin of the Voren house, somewhere in his hundreds by their reckoning, and he'd been drinking the pale Vecinari liquor that smells like burnt sugar and hits like an argument. He kept circling the gift table, kept glancing at the ceremonial blade laid out near the centerpiece. A thin, curved thing, more heirloom than weapon, the kind of object every old house keeps around because tradition says you have to. I'd clocked him as a problem 20 minutes before he became one. I just didn't clock the shape the problem would take. It happened fast, the way these things do. Sael said something. I never learned what. And Threl's face did something ugly. And then he had the ceremonial blade in his hand and he was moving toward her in a way that had nothing ceremonial left in it. I was closer than her guards were. I did the thing you do when you've spent 3 years reading rooms for a living and you suddenly run out of room to read. I stepped into the gap. The blade went into me instead of her. High, under the collarbone, angled down. I found out later exactly how far down, but in the moment, I only registered pressure, a hard shove of cold that didn't yet feel like pain. Threl staggered back, horrified at what he'd done, and 2 of Sael's guards had him on the floor before the glass in his other hand finished falling. I want to be honest about what I felt, because the embassy physicians spent considerable time afterward trying to get me to describe it accurately, and fine was not an answer they accepted. It hurt. It hurt the way a slammed door hurts a finger. Sharp, immediate, entirely real. But it didn't hurt the way the room expected it to. Nobody screamed except a junior attaché near the punch table, and that was mostly on Threl's behalf. I put a hand to my collarbone, felt the wet warmth there, and made the only decision that made sense to me at the time, which was that Sael was still standing in the middle of her own party looking like she might faint, and somebody needed to keep the room from following her down. So I told her she looked lovely, that the necklace suited her, that Threl had clearly had too much of the pale liquor, and the house would handle it quietly. I said it loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, because a room takes its cue from whoever sounds calmest, and I needed this one calm. I kept my hand pressed under my collar, kept smiling, kept the conversation moving toward the cake, because if there is one universal truth about diplomatic functions across every species I have ever served, it's that cake fixes a remarkable percentage of social emergencies. It took the embassy physician, a clipped, precise woman named Dr. Ilvash Kaur, nearly 40 minutes to get me alone, because I kept finding small fires to put out, a delegate who'd seen too much and needed reassuring, Sael's own guards who needed to be told, gently, that yes, the human was fine. No, she didn't need to sit down. Could someone please cut the cake before the ice sculpture gave up entirely? When Kaur finally got the dress off my shoulder and saw the wound, she went very still in a way I'd come to recognize as the Vecinari equivalent of a scream. "You have been functioning," she said, with a blade wound 4 centimeters from your heart, for the better part of an hour. It didn't feel like the better part of an hour. You gave a toast. I was asked to. She ran the scanner over me twice, then a third time, because the readout kept telling her something her training said was impossible. The blade had nicked the edge of a major vessel, not missed it, nicked it, and instead of the catastrophic bleed her physiology charts insisted should follow, I'd lost what she eventually classified, with visible reluctance, as a survivable and almost insultingly modest amount of blood. My body had narrowed the vessel at the injury site within minutes. Some old evolutionary trick for surviving a world full of animals with teeth, clotting and clamping down hard enough that I'd spent the back half of Sale's party more annoyed by the sticky feeling under my dress than anything resembling danger. Your pain response is intact, Core said, almost accusing me of something. Your scanner shows you registered this. You are not numb. You felt it. I felt it. I just decided it could wait. That was the part she couldn't file anywhere. Veterinary physiology treats significant injury as an immediate, total system event. The body stops, the mind stops, everything stops, to deal with the emergency, because that's the sane and correct response to having a hole put in you. Mine apparently had a setting underneath the pain that let the rest of me keep running the room, while some quieter, older part handled the bleeding without asking permission. Core called 3 colleagues in over the next 2 hours, and I sat on the examination table answering the same questions 4 times, while 4 different physicians took turns looking at my collarbone like it had personally insulted their medical degrees. One of them, a younger physician who introduced himself only by his title, asked me to describe the 40 minutes between the blade and the examination table, in as much detail as I could remember, in order, no summarizing. I gave him the toast. I gave him the conversation about Sal's necklace. I gave him the moment I'd asked a server, in passing, whether they'd be cutting the cake soon, because the ice sculpture was sweating badly, and I didn't want Sal's evening remembered for a ruined dessert table. He wrote all of it down without once looking up, and when he finally did look up, his expression was the kind I imagine his species reserves for things they intend to write papers about. This is not strength, the senior of them finally said, more to the room than to me. Strength would be obvious. This is worse. This is a species that can be grievously wounded and choose, consciously, to finish a conversation first. I told them it wasn't a choice so much as a job. Sale's party needed someone calm in it, and I happened to be available. They wrote that down too, though I don't think it landed the way I meant it. Threl Mawog was confined pending a House tribunal, and I understand the charge against him grew considerably once the embassy's report on my injury circulated. Sael sent flowers the next morning, along with a card that simply said she was sorry, and that she hadn't known. I told her there was nothing to know, that I'd done my job, and that the cake had been very good. The embassy reassigned 2 additional veterinary medical staff to the Human Liaison Office after that, ostensibly for routine monitoring. I've seen the internal memo since. It doesn't use the word frightened. It uses the word recalibrate 4 times in a single paragraph, and a closing note recommending that future security briefings treat human staff not as a vulnerability to be protected, but as a variable whose threshold for catastrophe remains, at this time, unknown and possibly unmeasurable. I keep a thin white scar under my collarbone now, just below where the dress line sits. Sael still asks about it sometimes, carefully, like she's checking a wound that might reopen if she says the wrong thing. I tell her the truth, which is that it doesn't hurt anymore, and that I'd do it again without needing to think it through first. She always goes quiet after that. I've stopped trying to explain why. Some things you only understand from the inside of a body that decided, on its own, that the party could wait to find out it was supposed to be over.